The Mafia boss dealt so passionately with me on that Craving night that I screamed. And he won't stop. My body trembled against the silk sheets in his Garden District mansion bedroom as Adolfo Whitney refused to stop. I screamed again, not in pain but in overwhelming pleasure that shattered every wall I had spent 28 years building around my heart. His muscular frame hovered over me, intricate tattoos dancing across his arms in the dim lamplight. Those intense gray eyes locked onto mine with a hunger that demanded complete surrender. My honey-blonde hair spread wild across the pillows, my wine-colored dress long forgotten on the marble floor. This man, New Orleans' most dangerous mafia boss, was breaking me open in ways I never knew possible. Just 3 weeks ago, I was Marilyn Reber, a careful art curator from Chicago who color-coded her planner and dated safe men with safe jobs. Now I was here, screaming his name, craving more even as he pushed me beyond every limit I thought I had. How did a responsible woman like me end up in the passionate arms of a man the entire city feared? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel because tomorrow we're dropping another powerful romance story you won't want to miss. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more captivating stories like this one. 3 weeks earlier, I stepped off the plane at Louis Armstrong International Airport with a carefully organized itinerary and a return ticket for 7 days later. I was Marilyn Reber, 28 years old, an art curator from Chicago with a life that ran like clockwork. My apartment near Lincoln Park was organized by color and season. My calendar had every hour accounted for. My relationships were polite, predictable, and emotionally safe. I dated men who worked in finance or law, who took me to restaurants where we discussed wine pairings and weekend plans. Nothing surprised me. Nothing shook me. Nothing made my heart race with anything more than mild interest. I came to New Orleans to research emerging Southern artists for my gallery's spring exhibition. I had hotel reservations near the St. Louis Cathedral, a list of galleries in the Warehouse District to visit, and plans to attend a jazz performance on Frenchmen Street. Everything was scheduled, budgeted, and safe. That was how I lived my life. My father had worked 3 jobs to give our family stability. My mother had taught me that careful planning prevented disaster. I had learned those lessons well, perhaps too well. The rain started on my 3rd evening in the city. I had spent the day visiting galleries, taking notes, being professional and thorough. November in New Orleans meant unpredictable weather, but I had checked the forecast. The storm was not supposed to arrive until midnight. Nature, however, does not follow schedules. The sky opened up while I was walking along Bourbon Street, and within seconds, I was soaked through my sensible blazer and skirt. I ran for the nearest door and found myself inside a bar called The Crescent. The moment I crossed that threshold, I knew I had made a mistake. This was not a place for tourists taking shelter from the rain. The conversations were low and serious. Men in expensive suits sat in leather booths, their posture suggesting they were accustomed to being obeyed. The lighting was dim, almost secretive. The bartender, a woman with silver streaking through her black hair, looked at me with an expression that clearly said I did not belong here. I stood there dripping rainwater onto the dark wood floor, my honey-blonde hair plastered to my face, my carefully applied makeup probably running down my cheeks. I was about to apologize and leave when a voice cut through the quiet murmur of the room. "She's exactly where she needs to be." I turned toward that voice and felt my breath catch. In the corner booth sat a man who commanded attention without moving. Adolfo Whitney, though I did not know his name yet, sat in shadows that somehow made him more visible rather than less. His dark hair was styled with casual precision. His suit was tailored perfectly to his muscular frame. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Gray, almost silver in the low light. They fixed on me with an intensity that made me feel exposed and seen in ways I had never experienced. Even from across the room, I could see the tattoos that wound up his forearms where his sleeves were rolled back. Intricate designs that seemed to tell stories I could not read. Everything about him screamed danger. Everything about him whispered power. Every instinct I had told me to turn around and walk back into the rain. I just came in to get out of the storm, I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. Then sit. Have a drink. The rain in New Orleans doesn't care about anyone's schedule. He gestured to the seat across from him. It was not quite a command, but it was not exactly an invitation either. I should have left. I should have thanked him politely and walked out that door. But something in his gaze held me. Not a threat, but a challenge. An invitation to step outside the carefully drawn lines I had lived within for 28 years. My heart pounded as I crossed that bar and slid into the booth across from Adolfo Whitney. I did not know then that I was crossing more than just a room. I was crossing into a completely different life. What's a woman like you doing in a place like this? Adolfo asked as the bartender brought me a glass of red wine I had not ordered. A woman like me? I lifted my chin slightly, finding courage I did not know I possessed. Cultured, careful, clearly not from around here. His lips curved into a slight smile. You look like someone who lives by rules. And you look like someone who breaks them, I countered. His laugh was low and genuine. I make them. Breaking them would be redundant. That response should have sent me running. Instead, it fascinated me. We talked for 3 hours while the rain continued its assault on the city outside. Adolfo ordered food I did not ask for but discovered I was hungry for. He asked about my work, and I found myself telling him about the art I curated, the emerging artists I championed, the exhibitions I built from concept to opening night. You have passion when you talk about art, he observed, watching me with those intense gray eyes. Real passion, not the polite enthusiasm people use at gallery openings. Art matters, I said simply. It's how we make sense of beauty and pain and everything between. Tell me about your collection, he said, assuming I had one. I laughed. I can't afford to collect the kind of art I curate. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Chicago. My walls have prints, not originals. That's a shame. Everyone should own something that moves them. He paused. I collect art. Real pieces. I have a Degas in my study, a Hopper in my library, 3 contemporary pieces from artists who are not yet famous but will be. I stared at him. This man, who clearly operated outside the law based on the deference everyone in this bus showed him, collected serious art. How did you get into collecting? I spent 3 years in Europe. Paris, mostly. Rome for a while. I was supposed to be learning the family business, but I spent most of my time in museums. He spoke easily, without pretension. I learned that power and beauty are not opposites. They can coexist. Sometimes they need each other. What is the family business? I asked, though I suspected I knew. He did not hesitate. I control certain operations in this city. Things that happen in shadows. Money that moves through unofficial channels. Protection that people pay for. Justice that the courts cannot provide. His eyes never left mine. I run a criminal empire, Marilyn. I know your name because I make it my business to know who enters my establishments. And I'm telling you what I am because I don't believe in lying about it. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt strangely calm. There was something about his directness that felt more honest than the carefully constructed personas of the men I usually dated. Why are you telling me this? Because you're different. You walked in here by accident, but you stayed by choice. I want to know why. He leaned forward slightly. And because I'm interested in you, and I don't pursue interest built on false pretenses. We talked about New Orleans, about the city's relationship with both beauty and corruption. He told me about his code of honor, how he operated with rules even in a world without laws. He spoke about protecting neighborhoods from worse predators, about settling disputes that might otherwise turn violent, about using his power to maintain a certain order in the chaos. You curate other people's passions, he said as the hours stretched on. You arrange their art, tell their stories, present their visions. But what's yours? What's your passion, Marilyn? The question struck something deep inside me. I had spent so many years being responsible, being careful, being the person who made sensible choices, that I had forgotten to ask myself what I actually wanted. I don't know, I admitted. That's the first honest thing you've said all night. He stood, extending his hand. Come on. I'll have someone drive you back to your hotel. You're safe with me, even if you're not safe from me. I let him guide me to a car waiting outside. The rain had stopped. He opened the door for me, his hand lingering on mine for just a moment. Think about my question, he said softly. That night, I lay awake in my hotel room overlooking Jackson Square, replaying every moment of that conversation. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I felt awake. The next day, I stood in a gallery in the Arts District pretending to focus on an exhibition of contemporary Southern artists. My notebook was open. My pen was in my hand. But I could not tell you a single thing about the paintings on those walls. My mind was completely occupied by memories of the night before. Adolfo's voice, his eyes, the way he had looked at me like I was a puzzle he wanted to solve. The question that would not leave me alone, what was my passion? I told myself it had been an interesting encounter, nothing more. A story I could tell back in Chicago about the night I accidentally wandered into a Mafia bar and had drinks with a dangerous man. I would file it away as an adventure, a brief departure from my normal life. By tomorrow, I would forget about Adolfo Whitney and return to my scheduled gallery visits. My phone buzzed at 2 in the afternoon. An unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. Dinner. Commander's Palace. 8 o'clock tonight. Come as you are, or come as who you want to be. 8W. My heart raced as I read those words 3 times. Commander's Palace was one of the most celebrated restaurants in New Orleans, a landmark of Creole cuisine in the Garden District. It was public, respectable, elegant. It was also absolutely a date. Having dinner with Adolfo Whitney would be crossing a line I could not uncross. I should have declined. I should have sent a polite message thanking him but explaining I was only in town for research. I should have protected the careful, safe life I had built. Instead, I went back to my hotel and stood in front of my small suitcase, looking at the wine-colored dress I had packed on impulse but never planned to wear. It was more daring than my usual style, with a neckline that suggested rather than revealed, fabric that clung to curves I usually downplayed. I put it on. I did my makeup with more care than I had in months. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked alive, awake, ready for something she could not name. The restaurant staff at Commander's Palace treated Adolfo like royalty, leading us to a private dining room with views of the oak-lined streets below. He wore a charcoal suit tailored perfectly to his muscular frame, and when he looked at me in that wine-colored dress, his eyes held an appreciation that made my skin warm. "You chose to be who you want to be," he said as I sat down. I liked that choice. Dinner was extraordinary. Not just the food, though every course was perfection, but the conversation. Adolfo courted me with an old-world intensity that felt almost out of time. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He challenged my opinions without dismissing them. He told me about his vision for New Orleans, for finding balance between the legitimate world and the shadow economy he controlled. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not," he said over dessert. "I'm not a good man by most measures. I make decisions that affect lives. I do things that would shock you. But I also protect people. I keep worse men from taking what I control. I try to use my power for more good than harm." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Why not just charm me and hide the difficult parts?" "Because I want you to choose this with your eyes open." He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch sending electricity through my entire body. "If you walk away after tonight, I'll respect that. But if you stay, I want it to be because you know exactly who I am." The honesty was devastating. Men I had dated in Chicago hid their flaws behind polite conversation and careful presentation. Adolfo laid his darkness on the table like an offering, trusting me to decide if I could accept it. The vulnerability in that honesty touched something deep inside me. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "I don't know how to be the kind of woman who has dinner with a man like you." "You're doing it right now." His thumb stroked across my knuckles. "And you're doing it perfectly." Walking out of that restaurant, his hand on the small of my back, I knew I was not going back to my safe life unchanged. Adolfo Whitney was awakening something in me that had been sleeping for years. Something hungry, something brave, something that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. The following days blurred together in a way that felt both dreamlike and more real than anything I had experienced before. Adolfo pursued me with a focus that was overwhelming and intoxicating. The morning after our dinner at Commander's Palace, I woke to find my hotel room filled with flowers. Not the predictable roses that men usually send, but exotic blooms from the French market that I could not name. Deep purples and brilliant oranges, petals that felt like silk, scents that made my small room smell like a garden in some faraway paradise. The card reads simply, "Today, let me show you my city. A." He picked me up at noon in a black car with windows tinted dark enough to hide its occupants. "Where are we going?" I asked as I slid into the leather seat beside him. "Everywhere you won't find in your guidebook," he said, and smiled in a way that made my stomach flip. He took me to a jazz club in Treem where musicians played for pure love of the music, where the saxophone sang stories of heartbreak and resilience, where the drummer's rhythm felt like the pulse of the city itself. We sat in the back, his arm around my shoulders, and I felt the music move through both of us like a shared secret. He introduced me to the owner, an elderly man who hugged Adolfo like family and looked at me with knowing eyes that seemed to say he had seen many women come and go but recognized I was different. We had coffee at a tiny cafe in the Bywater where artists and poets gathered, where the walls were covered in local art that shifted between brilliant and disturbing. Adolfo knew half the people there, greeting them with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged to this hidden New Orleans. They treated him with respect but also genuine affection. This was not the dangerous mafia boss from the Crescent. This was a man who loved his city and the people who made it authentic. Late that night, he drove me to a spot along the Mississippi River where we could watch the massive ships pass in the darkness, their lights reflecting on the water like fallen stars. We stood at the railing, and he moved behind me, his arms circling my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. "This is what I protect," he said quietly. "Not just territory or business. This city, these people, the musicians and artists and dreamers who make New Orleans what it is. I keep worse men from destroying what matters here." I leaned back against his chest, feeling safe in a way that made no logical sense. I extended my stay, I admitted. I called my gallery and told them I needed 2 more weeks for research. Is it really for research? His breath was warm against my ear. No. The honesty felt liberating. It's for you. The days that followed became a beautiful dance of escalating romance. Every morning brought new flowers to my hotel room. Every evening brought new discoveries of the city and of each other. He took me to City Park where ancient oak trees draped with Spanish moss created a canopy that felt sacred. We walked beneath those trees, his hand holding mine, talking about everything and nothing. He kissed me for the first time under those oaks. His lips were demanding but tender, claiming but asking, and I kissed him back with a hunger that shocked me. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his gray eyes searched mine. I won't lie to you, he said, his voice rough with desire. I want you. Completely. But choose me with your eyes open. Marilyn. Know what you're getting into. The tension between us grew with each passing day. Physical desire mixed with emotional connection in ways that felt dangerous and necessary. I extended my stay again. 2 weeks became 3. I made excuses to Chicago that grew thinner each time. My carefully organized life was falling apart, and I could not bring myself to care. What terrified me most was not Adolfo's world of shadows and power. It was the intensity of my own feelings. I was falling for this man with a speed and depth that went against everything I had learned about being careful and safe. He consumed my thoughts. His touch haunted my dreams. The way he looked at me made me feel desired and valued in ways I had never experienced. I was falling in love with New Orleans' most dangerous man, and I had no idea how to stop it. Weiss, I did not want to stop it. I wanted to fall further, deeper, completely. December arrived in New Orleans with a gentleness that felt magical. The city transformed for Christmas with white lights strung through the oak trees and wreaths hung on historic doors. Adolfo's mansion on Prytania Street became something out of a dream. Garlands of fresh greenery wound up the curved staircase. Candles flickered in every window. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the elegant rooms. I had been in New Orleans for 5 weeks. My 2-week research trip had become something I could no longer pretend was temporary. I kept clothes at Adolfo's mansion now, though I still maintained my hotel room as if that somehow made this less permanent, less real, less terrifying. That evening, Adolfo had taken me to a private Christmas concert at the Cabildo in the French Quarter. Local musicians performed classical pieces in the historic building where Louisiana had once been governed. He sat beside me in the audience, his hand holding mine, his thumb tracing cycles on my palm that made concentration impossible. I was aware of every breath he took, every slight movement of his body, the heat radiating from where our shoulders touched. The tension between us had been building for weeks. We had kissed countless times. His hands had explored my body through clothes that suddenly felt like berries rather than protection. But we had not crossed that final line. Part of me wondered if he was waiting for something, some signal from me that I was truly ready to commit to whatever this relationship was becoming. When we returned to the mansion, the house was quiet. His staff had retired for the evening. We were alone in a space that felt both vast and intimate. Adolfo led me to the library, a room I had come to love for its walls of books and the fireplace that cast dancing shadows across leather furniture. He poured us both wine and we stood by the fire, not speaking, just feeling the weight of everything unspoken between us. I could see my reflection in the darkened windows, wearing the emerald dress I had bought specifically because I knew the color would please him. I looked different than I had 5 weeks ago. More alive, more present, more myself. "You're thinking too much," Adolfo said, breaking the silence. "I can see it in your eyes." "One of us should think," I replied, but my voice lacked conviction. "Why?" He moved closer, setting down his wineglass. Thinking has kept you safe, certainly. But has it made you happy? The question hit me like a physical blow. Happiness isn't everything. No, he agreed, his hand sliding around my waist and pulling me close. But feeling alive is. Being honest about what you want is. Stopping the pretense that passion is something to fear rather than embrace is. He kissed me, and this kiss was different from all the others. More urgent, more demanding, more honest in its hunger. I kissed him back with an intensity that surprised me, my hand sliding up his chest to his shoulders, feeling the muscles beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. Every careful control I had maintained dissolved under the heat of genuine desire. "Come with me," he whispered against my lips. He took my hand and led me up the curved staircase to his bedroom. I had never been in this room before. It was masculine and elegant, dominated by a massive bed that overlooked the garden through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights of New Orleans glowed in the distance, but here in the Garden District, surrounded by ancient trees, we might have been the only two people in the world. Adolfo turned to face me, his gray eyes intense in the soft lamplight. His hands moved to my shoulders, sliding the straps of my dress down slowly, giving me every opportunity to stop him. I did not stop him. I helped him, reaching back to unzip the dress, letting it fall to the floor in a pool of emerald silk. His intake of breath made me feel powerful and beautiful. He shed his jacket, his shirt, revealing the full extent of the tattoos that covered his chest and arms. Intricate designs that told stories of his family, his city, his journey. I traced them with my fingers, learning him through touch. What happened next was beyond anything I had experienced before. Adolfo was demanding but attentive, passionate but tender, taking me to heights of feeling I had not known existed. He kissed every inch of my skin. His hands knew exactly where to touch, how much pressure to apply, when to be gentle and when to be firm. He studied my responses like he was learning a language only my body spoke. When he finally claimed me completely, I gasped at the intensity of the connection. This was not just physical. This was the breaking down of every wall I had built around my heart. Every defense mechanism I had constructed to keep myself safe crumbled under the weight of genuine intimacy. "Let go," he whispered against my ear. "Stop controlling everything. Just feel." I tried to hold back, tried to maintain some fragment of composure, but Adolfo would not allow it. He understood instinctively that this night was about more than satisfaction. It was about demanding I acknowledge the depth of my own capacity for passion. He pushed me beyond every limit I thought I had, refusing to stop even when I begged, driving me higher and higher until I screamed. I actually screamed. A sound that came from somewhere deep in my soul, primal and honest and completely free. A release of years of controlled emotions, of suppressed desires, of denied needs. He did not stop. He continued relentlessly, taking me through wave after wave of overwhelming pleasure until I thought I might shatter completely. When it finally ended, I lay trembling in his arms, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness but of release, of transformation, of recognizing that the woman I had been no longer existed. Adolfo had broken me open in the most beautiful way possible, and I would never be the same. "I've got you," he murmured, holding me close as my body continued to tremble. "I've got you, Marilyn. You're safe with me." Safe. The word should have been ironic coming from New Orleans' most dangerous man. But in that moment, wrapped in his arms, I felt safer than I ever had in my carefully constructed life. I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the unfamiliar weight of Adolfo's arm draped across my waist. We were tangled together in sheets that smelled of expensive detergent and our mingled scents. His chest was pressed against my back, his breathing deep and even, still asleep. I lay there perfectly still, afraid that moving would make the night before fade into something less real. But I felt fundamentally changed. The careful curator from Chicago who color-coded her planner and made sensible choices seemed like a character I had played rather than who I really was. Last night, Adolfo had stripped away every pretense, every defense, every carefully constructed wall. He had seen me completely vulnerable and had not turned away. He had demanded I feel everything, hide nothing, and surrender totally. The memory of my own screams echoed in my mind. I had never made sounds like that before. Never lost control so completely. Never felt so intensely that my entire body shook with the force of it. And he had not stopped, even when I begged, understanding somehow that I needed to be pushed through my limits to discover what existed on the other side. "I can hear you thinking again," Adolfo murmured against my hair, his voice rough with sleep. I turned in his arms to face him. In the morning light, he looked softer, more approachable, though no less dangerous. His gray eyes studied my face with an intensity that made me feel transparent. "This can't work," I whispered, voicing the fear that lurked beneath the afterglow of the night before. "Our lives are too different. I live in Chicago. You. Your world is here. Your responsibilities. Your empire. I have a career, a life I built over years. This was supposed to be a research trip, and now I've been here 5 weeks and I don't know what I'm doing anymore. So change your life." He said it as if it were the simplest thing in the world. It's not that easy. It's exactly that easy. The complicated part is admitting what you really want. He shifted to look at me more directly, propping himself up on one elbow. "You've spent 5 weeks making excuses about why you're still here. Extending your stay. Telling your gallery you need more time. Keeping your hotel room even though you spend every night here. You're trying to keep one foot in your old life while living in this new one." His words stung because they were true. I had been hedging, maintaining escape routes, pretending this was temporary even as it became more permanent with each passing day. What if I can't do this? What if I can't live in your world? The question came out smaller than I intended. I'm not asking you to approve of everything I do. I'm not even asking you to fully understand my world. His hand came up to cup my face with surprising gentleness. But I am asking you to be honest about what's happening between us. Last night was not casual, Marilyn. What we have is not casual. You know it and I know it. I'm scared, I admitted. I've never felt anything like this before. It's too intense. Too much. With you, I feel things I didn't know I could feel. You push me beyond every boundary I've set for myself. Last night I screamed, "Adolfo." I completely lost control. That's not who I am. That's exactly who you are. You've just spent years suppressing it. He stroked his thumb across my cheekbone. You've built a safe life doing safe things with safe people. But safe and happy are not the same thing. I saw your face last night when you let go. That was happiness. That was freedom. That was you being completely, honestly yourself. Tears pricked my eyes because he was right. Last night, in the midst of overwhelming passion, I had felt more myself than I ever had in 28 years of careful living. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Honesty. Choose to be here or choose to leave, but stop pretending you're undecided. Stop keeping your hotel room as an escape plan. Stop extending your trip 2 weeks at a time like you're going to wake up one morning and return to your old life." His voice was firm but not harsh. "I want all of you, Marilyn. Not the version of you that's trying to stay safe. The real you. The woman who screamed in my arms last night. The woman who loves art with genuine passion. The woman who's brave enough to build a life that doesn't fit anyone's expectations. I looked into his eyes and saw absolute certainty. He knew what he wanted. He had chosen me completely. The question was whether I had the courage to choose him the same way. "I'll call my gallery today," I heard myself say. "I'll tell them I need an extended leave of absence. Maybe 6 months. Maybe longer. I'll figure out what I can do here in New Orleans, whether there's work for me, how I can build something." "You're sure?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "I'm terrified. But I'm also more alive with you than I've ever been. And I think that's worth the risk." He kissed me then, deep and thorough, and I kissed him back with all the honesty he had demanded. When we finally pulled apart, I knew I had made my choice. Not the safe one, not the sensible one, but the true one. Later that morning, while Adolfo was in the shower, I made the call to Chicago. My hands shook as I told my gallery director I needed at least 6 months' leave for personal reasons. There was shock, questions, concern about upcoming exhibitions. I answered calmly, professionally, while sitting naked in the bed of a Mafia boss, surrounded by evidence of the most passionate night of my life. When I hung up, I felt lighter. No more excuses. No more escape plans. I had chosen this, chosen him, chosen the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of a life I had never imagined for myself. 2 days after I made my decision to stay, Adolfo told me it was time to meet his sister. Valentina Whitney ran the legitimate side of the family business empire, restaurants, real estate holdings, import companies that operated entirely within the law. She was the public face of the Whitney name while Adolfo operated in the shadows. We met her for lunch at one of her restaurants in the French Quarter, a beautiful establishment with exposed brick walls and tables covered in crisp white linens. Valentina arrived precisely on time, a woman in her early 30s with the same striking gray eyes as her brother and a presence that commanded attention without effort. She wore a tailored business suit and expensive jewelry, every inch the successful entrepreneur. She studied me with an intensity that made me feel like I was being evaluated for a position I had not applied for. We made polite conversation over appetizers, discussing art and New Orleans culture, but I could feel her assessing every word I spoke, every gesture I made. Finally, as our main courses arrived, Valentina set down her fork and looked directly at me. "You're still here?" "I am," I confirmed, meeting her gaze. "Most women don't last more than a few weeks once they understand what my brother really is. They either can't handle the danger or they can't reconcile the contradiction of a man who collects daggers and also controls half the illegal activity in this city." She glanced at Adolfo, who sat quietly beside me. "But you're different." "How can you tell?" I asked. "Because he's different with you." Valentina's expression softened slightly. "I've watched my brother maintain absolute control over every aspect of his life since he was 16 years old. He never shows vulnerability. He never lets anyone close enough to matter. But with you, he's softer, more human. He looks at you like you're something precious he's afraid of breaking." I felt Adolfo's hand find mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine. "Marilyn is staying in New Orleans," he said. "She's making a life here. I wanted you to meet her properly because she's not temporary." Valentina smiled then, genuine warmth replacing the cool assessment. "Good. It's about time someone challenged you to be more than just the family legacy." Over the following weeks, I began to truly understand the complexity of Adolfo's position in New Orleans. He took me to neighborhoods where his presence brought smiles rather than fear. In the lower Ninth Ward, he funded after-school programs that kept kids off dangerous streets. In Treem, He helped elderly residents keep their homes when developers tried to force them out. He mediated disputes between rival groups before they could turn violent. One evening, as we drove through the city, I asked him directly about his philosophy. "The world isn't divided into good people and bad people," he said, navigating the streets with easy familiarity. "It's more complicated than that. I do things that are illegal, yes. I profit from activities that society condemns. But I also make sure those activities happen with rules, with protection for the vulnerable, with limits that prevent the worst abuses." "That sounds like rationalization," I challenged. "Maybe it is. But ask the single mother in the 7th Ward whose landlord tried to evict her illegally until I intervened. Ask the musician whose equipment was stolen and returned within 24 hours because everyone knows my protection extends to artists. Ask the shop owners on Magazine Street who don't pay protection money to 3 different gangs because I control that territory and don't extort honest businesses." He glanced at me. "I'm not claiming to be a hero, but I'm not the villain you might think either." I watched how people interacted with him over the following weeks. There was respect, certainly, and a healthy awareness of his power. But there was also genuine gratitude from people he had helped, affection from those who had known him for years, and trust from communities that had learned he kept his word. I found my own role in his world through art. Adolfo's collection was impressive but conservative, focused on established masters and safe investments. I introduced him to emerging artists whose work challenged conventional beauty, pieces that provoked rather than comforted. We visited studios in the Bywater together, met painters and sculptors who were creating vital new work. "You're teaching me to see differently," he said one afternoon in a young artist's studio, studying a massive abstract canvas that depicted the violence and beauty of New Orleans in equal measure. "You're letting yourself be taught," I replied. "That's rarer than you think." But our relationship was not without conflict. 3 months into my stay, Adolfo made a business decision that troubled me deeply. A rival operation had tried to move into territory he controlled, and his response was swift and harsh. No one was killed, but people were hurt, businesses were destroyed, and the message was unmistakably violent. I confronted him that night in the library, anger overriding my usual caution. "You put 2 men in the hospital. You burned down a warehouse. How is that protecting anyone? Those men were selling drugs to children. That warehouse was their distribution center for products that were killing people in neighborhoods I protect." His voice was calm but firm. I gave them warnings. I offered alternatives. They refused both. "So you hurt them." "I stopped them. There's a difference." He stood from his chair, frustration evident in his posture. "You want me to be better than I am, Marilyn. You want me to protect people with gentle words and legal channels that don't exist in my world. But sometimes violence is the only language certain people understand. I don't want you to be different. I want you to find better solutions than putting people in hospitals." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "And I want you to understand that in my world, measured violence prevents worse violence. If I had done nothing, those men would have expanded their operation. More children would have died from contaminated products. More families would have been destroyed." He moved closer to me. "I'm not asking you to approve. I'm asking you to understand the impossible choices I face." We stood there, glaring at each other, the tension thick between us. This was our first real fight, and I did not know how to navigate it. In my previous relationships, disagreements had been polite and quickly resolved. This felt different, more honest, more raw, more important. "I hate that you're right," I finally said. "I hate that your logic makes sense in the context of your world. I hate that I can't offer you a better solution." "I know." His voice softened. I hate it too sometimes. But this is who I am, Marilyn. This is what I do. If you're going to stay, you need to accept that I will make decisions that trouble you. I can accept it. I just reserve the right to challenge you on them. He smiled then, pulling me into his arms. I wouldn't want you any other way. Our argument about his business decision continued throughout the evening, neither of us willing to back down completely. We moved from the library to the terrace overlooking the garden, our voices rising and falling with the intensity of our disagreement. The air between us crackled with tension that was both frustrating and strangely exhilarating. You can't just solve every problem with force, I insisted, pacing across the stone terrace. There has to be another way. Tell me what it is, he challenged, leaning against the railing. Give me a realistic alternative that protects the people in my neighborhoods from predators who don't respond to anything but strength. I don't have all the answers. I'm not claiming to. But I refuse to believe that violence is the only solution. That's because you've lived your entire life in a world where laws protect you, where police respond when you call, where justice exists in courtrooms. His frustration matched mine. The people I protect don't have those luxuries. For them, I am the law. I am the protection. I am the justice they can't get anywhere else. That's too much power for one person to have. You think I don't know that? He pushed away from the railing, moving toward me. You think I enjoy making decisions that affect lives? That I sleep peacefully knowing I chose violence over diplomacy? I carry every decision I make, Marilyn. Every consequence. Every person hurt in my name. The raw honesty in his voice stopped my pacing. I looked at him and saw not the confident Mafia boss but a man genuinely struggling with the weight of his responsibilities. Why do you do it, then? I asked more softly. If it burdens you this much, why not walk away? Because if I walked away, someone worse would fill the void. Someone without a code. Someone who wouldn't protect the vulnerable or limit the damage or try to use power for more good than harm. He ran his hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I didn't choose this life, Marilyn. I inherited it, but I've tried to make it mean something beyond just profit and power. We stood there in silence for a long moment, the argument losing its heat but the tension remaining. The garden below us was dark except for the soft glow of landscape lighting. The sounds of the city were distant, muffled by the trees and walls that surrounded the mansion. If you agreed with everything I did, you wouldn't be who you are, Adolfo said finally, his voice quieter now. And I fell in love with who you are, not some compliant version of you who nods and accepts everything without question. The words hung in the air between us like a declaration of war and peace simultaneously. I stared at him, my heart suddenly pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What did you say? I whispered. I fell in love with who you are. He moved closer, his gray eyes intense in the dim light. I love that you challenge me. I love that you make me question myself. I love that you see the worst parts of what I do and still choose to stay. I love your passion for art, your courage in leaving everything familiar, your honesty even when it's uncomfortable. I tried not to love you. You complicate everything. You make me want to be better than I am. You represent a life I can never fully have. But I love you, Marilyn. Completely. Possessively. Probably more than is healthy for either of us. It was the first time either of us had used that word. We had danced around it, implied it through actions, felt it in every touch and kiss, but never spoken it aloud. Hearing it now felt like the ground shifting beneath my feet. You love me. My voice shook. Completely. Tears filled my eyes as months of emotion crashed over me all at once. I love you too, I admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. I've been so scared to say it because it makes everything real. It makes this permanent. It means I can't pretend this is just an adventure or a phase or something I'll eventually walk away from. But I love you, Adolfo. I love you despite the danger, despite the moral complications, despite the fact that you infuriate me sometimes. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. He closed the distance between us in 2 steps, pulling me into his arms and kissing me with an intensity that stole my breath. I kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring months of unspoken feelings into that connection. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. "This is impossible," I said. "And inevitable," he replied. "Your world and mine shouldn't fit together." But they do, because we make them fit. We stood there holding each other as the reality of what we had just declared settled over us. This was not a casual romance or a temporary passion. This was love in its most consuming form. Possessive and demanding, but also generous and transforming. "I'm going to love you in ways that might overwhelm you," Adolfo said, his hands framing my face. "I'm possessive by nature. I'll want all of you, all the time. I'll push you beyond your comfort zone. I'll demand honesty even when it hurts. I'll protect you with everything I have, even when you don't think you need protecting." "That sounds like a warning," I said. "It's a promise, and a request for permission. Tell me you can handle being loved by a man like me." "I can handle it," I said with more confidence than I felt. "As long as you can handle being loved by a woman who won't stop challenging you to be better." "Deal." He kissed me again, softer this time but no less intense. We moved inside to his bedroom, our reconnect ion after the emotional breakthrough both urgent and tender. Making love this time felt different. The physical passion was still overwhelming, but now it carried the weight of spoken love. Every touch was a promise. Every kiss was a commitment. Every moment of intimacy deepened the bond between us beyond just physical satisfaction. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, I felt fundamentally changed once again. The woman I had been when I first arrived in New Orleans no longer existed. In her place was someone braver, more honest, more alive. Someone capable of loving a dangerous man and being loved completely in return. "I'll love you with everything I am," Adolfo whispered in the darkness. "I'll protect you with everything I have. I'll never stop choosing you, every single day." "That's all I need," I whispered back. And for the first time since arriving in New Orleans, I felt completely certain of my choice. Not safe, perhaps. Not simple, but absolutely, unquestionably right. The week after we declared our love, I flew back to Chicago for the first time in 3 months. Walking through my apartment near Lincoln Park felt like visiting a museum of someone else's life. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The color-coded closet, the carefully arranged art prints, the planner still open to the week I had departed for New Orleans. But none of it felt like mine anymore. I spent 4 days settling my affairs. I met with the gallery director and formally resigned from my position, recommending a colleague to take over my exhibitions. I packed the belongings that mattered, my books, my personal items, a few pieces of furniture that held sentimental value, and arranged for them to be shipped to New Orleans. I put my apartment on the market. With each decision, I felt lighter, as if I was shedding a skin that no longer fit. My parents came to the city to see me before I left. Over dinner at a restaurant I had been to dozens of times, I tried to explain my decision. "His name is Adolfo Whitney," I told them. "He's complicated. His business is complicated. But he's the most honest man I've ever met, and I love him more than I thought possible." My mother looked worried. My father looked skeptical. But they could see the change in me, The way my eyes lit up when I talked about New Orleans, the confidence in my voice when I described my plans, the absolute certainty that this was right even if it looked reckless from the outside. "You're different," my mother finally said. "Happier. More yourself." "I am," I agreed. When I returned to New Orleans, Adolfo was waiting at the airport. He pulled me into his arms right there in the terminal, kissing me with a possessiveness that made it clear he had hated every moment I was gone. "Don't leave again," he murmured against my hair. "I won't. Everything I need is here now." I began building a career in my adopted city with the same dedication I had given my work in Chicago, but with a freedom I had never allowed myself before. I started consulting for galleries throughout New Orleans, helping them curate exhibitions that would attract national attention. The Ogden Museum of Southern Art hired me to develop a series showcasing emerging regional artists. I spent days in the Bywater, visiting studios of painters and sculptors whose work deserved wider recognition. I met a young woman creating massive installations about climate change and coastal erosion. I discovered a photographer documenting second-line parades in ways that capture both their joy and their cultural significance. I found a mixed-media artist exploring the intersection of Creole heritage and contemporary urban life. Adolfo came with me sometimes, learning to see art through my eyes. He funded several artists directly, anonymous grants that allowed them to work without financial pressure. He purchased pieces for his growing collection based on my recommendations, trusting my judgment even when the work challenged him. "You're changing my taste," he said one afternoon in a studio filled with abstract expressionist canvases. 6 months ago, I would have walked past these without a second glance. Now I see what you see, the energy, the emotion, the truth beneath the chaos. "You're letting yourself evolve," I replied. "That's rare for someone in your position." He was evolving in other ways too. Slowly, carefully, he began shifting his operations toward more legitimate enterprises. Not abandoning his control, that would have created a dangerous power vacuum, but gradually transforming what that control meant. He invested in real estate development that revitalized neighborhoods without displacing residents. He backed small businesses that created jobs in communities that needed them. He used his influence to prevent exploitation rather than simply profiting from vice. "You make me want to be more than my father's legacy," he told me one night. "You challenge me without demanding. You inspire me without judging. You make me believe I can transform this empire into something that serves rather than just extracts." Our partnership became both personal and professional. I introduced him to gallery owners and artists who expanded his world. He introduced me to community leaders and neighborhood activists who helped me understand the city's complex social dynamics. We attended charity galas together, art openings together, jazz performances together. We became known as a couple, the Mafia boss and the art curator, an unlikely pairing that somehow worked. At night, we returned to the mansion on Prytania Street and shed our public personas. In the privacy of our bedroom, Adolfo was demanding and possessive, taking me with an intensity that never diminished. Our physical connection remained electric, each encounter a renewal of the passion that had first brought us together. He knew my body better than I knew it myself, understanding exactly what I needed, when to be gentle and when to be rough, how to push me to the edge and beyond. "You're mine," he would whisper in the darkness, his hands claiming every inch of my skin. "Say it." "I'm yours," I would respond, surrendering to the possessiveness that should have frightened me but instead felt like coming home. But our relationship was more than just passion. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. We debated philosophy and morality. We shared fears and dreams. We built something that was both intensely romantic and deeply practical, a partnership of equals who challenged and supported each other in equal measure. I watched Adolfo's empire slowly transform under the influence of our relationship. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. He made different choices, considered longer-term consequences, thought about legacy in new ways. His sister Valentina noticed the change and pulled me aside one day. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," she said. "I've watched my brother carry the weight of this family's history his entire adult life. You're helping him envision a different future. That's a gift." I had not set out to change Adolfo. That would have been arrogant and doomed to failure. But by being myself, by loving him completely while maintaining my own values, I had offered him an unspoken challenge. He rose to meet it not because I demanded it but because he wanted to be worthy of what we were building together. By late winter, my new life in New Orleans felt as natural as breathing. I had work that fulfilled me, a man who loved me completely, and a sense of purpose I had never found in my careful, planned existence in Chicago. The risk I had taken in staying had transformed into the greatest reward of my life. Winter gave way to spring in New Orleans with an explosion of color and warmth that felt like the city itself was celebrating. Azaleas bloomed in vivid pinks and purples throughout the Garden District. The air turned soft and fragrant with jasmine and sweet olive. The tourists who had come for Mardi Gras thinned out, leaving the city to those who truly loved it. In the mansion on Prytania Street, Adolfo and I settled into a rhythm that felt both exciting and natural. Our physical relationship continued with an intensity that showed no signs of fading. If anything, it deepened as we learned each other more thoroughly. Adolfo remained demanding and possessive in bed, his need for me as fierce as it had been that first transformative night. But now there was also a tenderness born of deep knowing. He understood which touches made me gasp, which words whispered in my ear made me tremble, exactly how much intensity one could handle before I shattered completely in his arms. Some nights were slow and deliberate, hours of exploration that left us both breathless and satisfied. Other nights were urgent and almost desperate, as if we needed to prove over and over that this connection was real. He still made me scream. He still refused to stop until I had given him everything. But now when I lay trembling in his arms afterward, I felt not just physical satisfaction but emotional completion. "I will never get enough of you," he told me one morning as dawn light filtered through the bedroom windows. His fingers traced patterns on my bare shoulder, his body still wrapped around mine. "Every time I think I've memorized you completely, I discover something new." "Is that your way of saying you're obsessed with me?" I teased. "Completely obsessed. Possessively obsessed. Probably unhealthily obsessed." He kissed my shoulder. "But you knew that when you chose to stay." The emotional intimacy between us grew alongside the physical. We talked about everything. Our childhoods, our fears, our dreams for futures we had never imagined before meeting each other. Adolfo told me about the pressure of inheriting his father's empire at 22, about the violence he had witnessed and participated in, about the constant weight of making life-and-death decisions. I told him about the loneliness of my safe life in Chicago, about always feeling like I was performing a role rather than living authentically, about the hunger for something more that I had suppressed for years. Our intellectual partnership flourished as well. I told him about contemporary art movements, about the politics of gallery representation, about how to see beauty in unconventional forms. He taught me about the hidden economics of cities, about power dynamics in communities the law did not reach, about the complicated realities of justice outside legal systems. We challenged each other constantly, neither willing to simply accept the other's perspective without question. I brought light and legitimacy to Adolfo's world in ways that surprised both of us. Gallery owners and artists who would never have associated with him before welcomed him to exhibitions because I vouched for his genuine appreciation of their work. Community organizations accepted his funding because I helped structure it through legitimate channels. He began attending cultural events not as a feared mafia boss but as a patron of the arts, a collector with sophisticated taste, a man invested in New Orleans' creative future. "You're making me respectable," he joked after we attended an opening at a prestigious gallery where he purchased 3 pieces from emerging artists. "I'm making you visible in different circles," I corrected. "You were always respectable to the people who mattered. Now you're just expanding who sees that side of you." Adolfo brought passion and purpose to my world in equal measure. Through him, I understood my artwork had real impact beyond aesthetic appreciation. The artists I championed gained collectors who could change their lives. The exhibitions I curated reached audiences who needed beauty in neighborhoods starved for cultural investment. My work mattered in concrete, measurable ways. He also taught me to embrace rather than fear my own intensity. In Chicago, I had dampened my passion, made myself smaller and safer and more controlled. With Adolfo, I learned to be fully myself, opinionated, demanding, uncompromising in my standards. He loved me not despite my strength but because of it. "Don't ever apologize for having strong opinions," he told me after I had passionately argued with a gallery director about artist compensation. "Your fire is one of the things I love most about you." Navigating our different backgrounds required constant adjustment. There were moments when his world frightened me, late-night phone calls about problems that required his immediate attention, references to situations I knew were dangerous, reminders that the man I loved operated outside the law. There were moments when my world bored him, lengthy discussions about artistic theory, gallery politics that seemed trivial compared to his concerns, my insistence on ethical considerations he found impractical. But we learned to bridge those gaps. His possessiveness, which could have been suffocating, was balanced by genuine respect for my independence and strength. He never demanded I abandon my values or stop challenging him. He wanted me strong, fierce, fully myself even when that made our relationship more complicated. My acceptance of who he was came with a continued expectation that he would evolve. I did not demand he become someone different, but I also refused to stop pushing him toward better choices when I believed they existed. Sometimes he listened. Sometimes he explained why my suggestions would not work in his reality. Always, he valued that I cared enough to challenge him. "Most people in my life tell me what they think I want to hear," he said one evening as we walked through City Park, the ancient oaks creating a canopy above us. "You tell me what you actually think, even when you know I'll disagree. Especially when you know I'll disagree. That honesty is precious to me, even when it means we fight." I asked, "Especially then? Our fights mean you care enough to engage rather than just accommodate." He pulled me closer, his arm around my waist. "I don't want a woman who simply accepts everything I do. I want a partner who makes me better. You do that, Marilyn, every day." Spring in New Orleans brought festival season, music on every corner, food that made the entire city smell delicious, a constant celebration of life and culture. Adolfo and I moved through it together, our partnership deepening with each shared experience. We were building something neither of us had planned but both of us needed, a love that was passionate and practical, intense and enduring, transformative for both of us. 6 months after that rainy night, when I had stumbled into the Crescent Bar, I woke up in the mansion on Prytania Street and realized I had stopped counting the days since I arrived. New Orleans was no longer my temporary adventure. It was home. Mardi Gras season arrived with its particular brand of beautiful chaos. The city transformed into a riot of purple, green, and gold. Parades rolled through streets lined with people who had claimed their spots hours earlier. Music poured from every bar and many front porches. The air smelled of king cake and spilled beer and the particular humidity that New Orleans wore like a second skin. Adolfo took me to parades in neighborhoods tourists rarely visited, where the celebrations were more intimate and authentic. We watched the crew of muses roll through Uptown, catching hand-decorated shoes thrown from elaborate floats. We attended the Zulu parade, understanding its cultural significance beyond the spectacle. We danced in the streets during second-line parades in Treem, where brass bands led processions that celebrated life itself with music that reached into your chest and made your heart beat differently. "You move like you belong here now," Adolfo observed as we danced together, his hands on my waist, the trumpet and trombone creating a rhythm impossible to resist. He was right. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a visitor and become part of the city. I knew which streets flooded in heavy rain. I had favorite po' boy shops and coffee stands. I understood the difference between uptown and downtown, between the Marigny and the Bywater, between tourist New Orleans and the real city underneath. I had learned to love the heat and the humidity, the sudden afternoon storms, the way the city smelled like jasmine and the river and cooking all at once. Early mornings in the French Quarter became my meditation. I would wake before Adolfo sometimes and walk through the quiet streets before the tourists emerged. Jackson Square in the soft dawn light, with artists setting up their displays and the St. Louis Cathedral bells marking the hour, felt sacred. Café du Monde with its chicory coffee and powdered sugar felt like a ritual. The French market with vendors arranging their goods felt like witnessing the city wake up and prepare for another day of being exactly itself. The mansion on Prytania Street had become more than just where I lived. It was home in a way my carefully decorated apartment in Chicago had never been. I had filled the rooms with art I loved, pieces from artists I had discovered, works that challenged and comforted in equal measure. My books lined the library shelves alongside Adolfo's. My clothes hung in the closet next to his expensive suits. My presence had transformed the house from a beautiful but somewhat cold showplace into a space that felt lived in and loved. In certain circles throughout New Orleans, I became known as Adolfo Whitney's woman. The phrase should have bothered my independent sensibilities, but I understood what it actually meant. It meant protection in neighborhoods where being connected to him mattered. It meant respect from people who might otherwise have dismissed me as just another outsider. It meant belonging to the city's hidden networks in ways that went beyond simply living here. Restaurant owners greeted me by name and always found me a table. Gallery owners sought my opinion and valued my recommendations. Musicians I had met through Adolfo invited me to private performances. I was woven into the fabric of New Orleans in ways that would have taken years to achieve without him, but I had also earned my place through my own work and genuine love for the city. My professional reputation in the New Orleans art community grew beyond my connection to Adolfo. The exhibition I curated for the Ogden Museum received attention in national art publications. Artists I had championed began getting gallery representation in other cities. I was invited to serve on panels and give talks about emerging Southern art. I built something meaningful that was entirely mine, even as I remained proudly his. The life I had constructed fit no one's expectations, least of all my own from 6 months earlier. I loved a dangerous man. I lived in a mansion purchased with money earned through illegal activities. I moved between the legitimate art world and the shadow economy Adolfo controlled. I had traded safety and predictability for passion and purpose. Every rule I had lived by in Chicago, I had broken in New Orleans. And yet, I had never been happier, never felt more myself, never believed so completely that I was exactly where I belonged. One afternoon, walking through the sculpture garden at City Park, I called my mother. "Are you happy?" she asked, the question carrying months of worry. Deliriously, I answered honestly, complicatedly, completely. "I'm happy, Mum. more than I ever was in my safe life. That's all I needed to hear, she said, and I could hear her smile through the phone. New Orleans had claimed me the same night Adolfo had. Suddenly, completely, irrevocably. I was no longer Marilyn Reber from Chicago pretending to be someone cautious and controlled. I was Marilyn Reber of New Orleans, a woman brave enough to build a life that made sense only to her and the man she loved. And that felt absolutely right. A spring evening found us on the balcony of the mansion, watching the sunset over the Garden District. The sky turned shades of pink and orange that painters spend their lives trying to capture. The oak trees below us swayed gently in the warm breeze, their Spanish moss moving like dancers. Adolfo stood behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder, a position that had become our favorite way to watch the city we both loved. "Do you remember that rainy night?" I asked softly, when I walked into the crescent completely by accident. His laugh rumbled through his chest into my back. "Accident? Fate? Does it matter? You walked in, and everything changed." "Everything," I agreed. If someone had told me that night that 6 months later I would be living in New Orleans, madly in love with a Mafia boss, building a completely different life, I would have thought they were crazy. And yet here you are. Here I am. I turned in his arms to face him. "I'm still scared sometimes. You know. Your world is dangerous. There are no guarantees. I worry that one day something will happen and I'll lose you. I worry that the choices you have to make will eventually destroy what we've built. I worry that this happiness is too intense to last." Adolfo's hands came up to frame my face with a tenderness that still surprised me from a man known for his ruthlessness. "I can't promise you safety. I can't promise that my world won't touch us in difficult ways. I can't promise that every day will be easy or that we won't face challenges that test us. I know. But I can promise you this." His gray eyes held mine with absolute certainty. "I will love you with everything I am. I will protect you with everything I have. I will choose you every single day for the rest of my life. And I will never stop showing you that this love is worth whatever risks come with it." Tears filled my eyes because I believed him completely. That's all I need. Our story was not ending. It was continuing, evolving, growing deeper with each passing day. We were not living a fairy tale with a neat conclusion. We were living a real love, complicated, challenging, passionate, and utterly worth it. Every morning we woke up and chose each other again. Every night we came together with the same intensity that had marked that first transformative encounter. In certain circles throughout New Orleans, we had become part of the city's law. The art curator and the Mafia boss. Beauty and danger intertwined. The woman who had wandered into the wrong bar on a rainy night and found exactly what she had been searching for without knowing she was searching. The man who had spent years maintaining absolute control until he met someone who made surrender feel like strength. I finally understood what I had been craving that night when I screamed in Adolfo's arms, when he refused to stop until he had broken through every wall I had built. It was not just physical pleasure, though that had been overwhelming and transformative. It was craving for authenticity, for living without pretense, for embracing passion instead of fearing it. It was hunger for a life fully lived rather than carefully controlled. The careful curator from Chicago had discovered she was capable of extraordinary courage. The dangerous Mafia boss had discovered he was capable of profound tenderness. Together, we had created something that defied easy categorization but felt absolutely right to both of us. The lesson I carried from our love story was simple but profound. Passion is worth the risk. Love requires courage. Life is meant to be lived fully, even when that means stepping outside every boundary you thought defined you. Safety and happiness are not the same thing. Sometimes the most responsible choice is the one that looks reckless from the outside. When rain fell on New Orleans now, which it did often and without warning, we would both smile at the memory of that first night. The rain had brought us together. It had given me an excuse to duck into a bar I would never have entered otherwise. It had created the circumstances for a meeting that changed both our lives completely. Our physical relationship remained as intense as ever. Adolfo still made me scream. He still pushed me beyond every limit I thought I had. He still refused to stop until I had given him everything. But now I understood that his demanding passion was not about control, it was about liberation. He demanded I be fully present, completely honest, utterly myself in his arms. And I demanded the same of him. We continued to evolve together. Adolfo's empire slowly transformed toward more legitimate operations. My career in New Orleans flourished beyond anything I had achieved in Chicago. We challenged each other daily, loved each other completely, and built something beautiful from the most unlikely circumstances. Our love story was not a conclusion. It was a continuation. Every day brought new choices, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that what we had built together was strong enough to withstand whatever came. Every night brought renewed passion, deeper intimacy, and the absolute certainty that we had found in each other something rare and precious and worth protecting with everything we had. Standing on that balcony as spring turned toward summer, surrounded by the city that had claimed us both, I felt grateful for every choice that had led me to this moment. Grateful for the rain that had brought me into the crescent. Grateful for the courage to sit down across from a dangerous man. Grateful for the passion that had awakened something dormant in my soul. Grateful for the love that had transformed both our lives. Adolfo kissed me as the last light faded from the sky, and I kissed him back with all the intensity of 6 months together and a lifetime ahead. This was our story. Not finished, but continuing. Not safe, but real. Not simple, but absolutely worth it. Thank you so much for watching our story. We would love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear about the courage to choose passion over safety. Subscribe to our channel because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful romance story you absolutely won't want to miss. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you these captivating love stories. Until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest love stories begin on rainy nights when we're brave enough to walk through unexpected doors.